Hello, and welcome to Precon Decon, the video series where I deconstruct the pre-constructed decks of Magic the Gathering's history. In this video, I'm going to be starting off looking at Mercadian Masques block and looking at the first set, which is Mercadian Masques. So I'm going to start off by looking at Deepwood Menace, which is a green and red deck. So let's take a look at the deck list here. So we have 24 creatures, 6 sorcery, 1 enchantment, 5 instants, 24 lands. A lot of creatures, so I think we know where this is going. Pretty bread and butter green-red deck. Just play a lot of creatures and attack with them. But let's have a look at them and see if it's potentially a bit more interesting than that. Okay, so we have some green creatures. First, let's look at Deepwood Tantive, which is 5 mana for a 2/4, and when it becomes blocked, you gain 2 life. That's obviously horrible, even for the time. So this is going to be a thing of Masques block, is that it is, compared to Urza's and Tempest before it, it's very low in power. There was definitely like a dip in kind of how good cards were. So there are just a lot of creatures which just have horrible drawbacks or are just really inefficient for their price. But we'll see a lot more of that as we progress. There are some good cards. I'm going off on a tangent here, but there were some good cards in Masques block, but a lot of it is anyway, we'll carry on looking at these creatures. Deepwood Tantive, it looks a bit like Cthulhu. At first glance, the artwork, it is, I think, meant to be like some sort of creature that's charging forward, and it has like antlers or giant, like flappy ears or something. But yeah, just at a glance, it looks very Cthulhu-y. Anyway, Deepwood Wolverine, 1 green mana for a 1/1. When it becomes blocked, it becomes 3/1 till end of turn. That's quite good, I think, for one mana. It lets it punch up, which is alright. Would be nice if it worked when it blocked as well, but yeah, that's fine, I guess. 3 of them. 3 Horn Trolls, just a 2/2 with 1 mana regeneration. Regeneration for a single mana, I think, is I've said a lot looking at these kind of precons, but being able to stop your creature dying for like 1 mana, I think, is very strong. Would have made like a good chump blocker, and you can kind of attack with it and not really worry about losing it. And Saber Ants is 4 mana for a 2/3. When it's dealt damage, you create that many 1/1 green insect creature tokens. I think that's pretty cool. I would actually I'd like to see this get reprinted, because I think that's actually quite a fun effect. Like when it gets damaged, creates a bunch of little tokens. Yeah, I think that's pretty fun. That seems quite core set worthy, maybe, I don't know, but yeah, I think Saber Ants is quite fun. And then we have 2 Squallmongers. So this is like a big theme of Masques block, and it's not a great theme in my opinion, but it is, I suppose, quite thematic. You have a lot of creatures and some enchantments as well, where the effects aren't exactly symmetrical, but any player can use the ability even if it's yours. So for example, on Squallmonger, who is a 3/3 monger, whatever a monger is meant to be. He for 2 mana, they do 1 damage to each creature with flying and each player, and any player can activate that ability. So there's like a whole cycle of these mongers that are well, they sort of run the range. I think this one is probably like the least offensive, maybe, but like I think the red one does like the earthquake ability, so 1 damage to each creature without flying and each player. The blue one gives flying. The white one, I think, gives protection, and the black one makes players discard, which which is, oh, that's fun. Let's put down that, and any player can use that ability. That sounds fun. But yeah, I guess whatever. It's a 3/3 for 4. This one is, I guess, technically not bad, because like you have no creatures in this deck that it harms, so your opponent is, I suppose, like less likely to do it. yeah, if you're being an aggressive deck as well, you're probably maybe doing more damage to them, so maybe you don't mind the symmetrical effect of doing damage because you'll be ahead of them. Yeah, I don't know. The mangas are a weird thing. Like, I don't know. I don't know how this card could have been better. Like maybe like any player can activate this ability, but like if the owner doesn't, it costs more or something because it represents because like the whole I'm going really off on a tangent here, but the whole Mercadia, like the plane on which the set is on, it has like this big theme of kind of like mercenaries and kind of shifting loyalties and stuff. So I guess that's what like cards like this are meant to represent. That kind of, oh, anyone, like I'm yours for a price, that kind of thing. Anyway, 2 Deepwood Drummers, 2 mana for a 1/1 Spell Shaper, 1 green tap, discard a card. Creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So spell shapers are a big thing in this whole block as well. So they're in masks, they're in nemesis, and they'll be in prophecy. So the whole idea is that you pay a cost, and discard a card, and they basically turn a card in your hand into a replica of kind of a well-known spell. So this guy is. It's meant to be giant growth. It's it's a smaller giant growth, but that's kind of like a theme they have. So they usually create a less powerful version of like quite a well-known spell. So yeah, there's a lot of them. There's a lot in every color. Yeah, they're okay, and there's a lot of them in these precons rather than actual spells. And then 3 Vine Trellises, 2 mana for a 0/4 wall, taps 12 1 green. I think that's fine. Like a mana dork that can block and isn't too vulnerable to being burned or killed. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. And then we have some red cards. So Battle Squadron is one of the rares of the deck. It is an XX flyer. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures you control. That's actually not terrible, I don't think. I guess for the time, this being sort of like maybe a 3/3, would have been kind of like on curve, I guess, especially for red. Yeah, and if you had this and like 3 or more other creatures out, it would have got more impressive. Like this would have been quite fun to have, I guess, with like saber ants. You damage your saber ants and make some tokens and it makes this bigger. But yeah, Battle Squadron's actually not a terrible card. One of the few rare creatures in Mask block that doesn't have a horrible drawback. Cinder Elemental, 2 of these. I think Cinder Elemental is pretty okay. 4 mana for a 2/2, which is not a great rate, but at any point you pay X, 1 red, tap it, sacrifice it, and does X damage to target creature or player. So it's basically Blaze on a stick, so you can swing with it, you can block with it, and then when you really need to, you can pop it, and it's just, yeah, that's fine. Chris Mage is another spell shaper, so there's 1 red mana for a 1/1. 1 red, tap, discard a card, does 1 damage to target creature or player. Discarding a card for 1 damage is not not great in my eyes. Admittedly, it is to anything, and it's on a creature that's only a 1/1 anyway, 1 mana anyway. So like for the time, okay, because like a Prodigal Sorcerer at the time was 3 mana for like for this ability. But I don't know, I feel like this would have been fine if it had been like shock, if it had been 2 damage. Maybe if it had only been able to hit creatures or players, I don't know. But I mean at that point it's a whole new card. But I just feel like discarding a card just to 1 damage is pretty weak. And then on the subject of shock, 2 shock troops, who are 4 mana for a 2/2, and you can sacrifice them, and they do 2 damage to target creature or player. That's okay. That's fine. Perfectly fine common creature, I think. Then we have some green spells. So 2 Desert Twister. This is a pretty fun reprint. It's so weird to see like a mono green spell that just straight up says destroy a permanent. Like really weird, like something that's not really part of its color identity these days, or if it does, it usually comes with like quite a few restrictions. Like the closest thing is like Beast Within, which can destroy anything, but then it makes a beast token under so kind of like white in that if it's destroying something an opponent controls, the opponent's going to get something out of it. But yeah, I mean that's just a big 6-mana sorcery, just straight up destroy a permanent. That's pretty good. I don't know how good. It's a bit expensive. It's okay. It is okay for, you know, in green. That's okay. 2 revives. 1 cost, 1 green, sorcery, return a green card from your graveyard to your hand. This is, yeah, in the right deck, this is basically a very budget regrowth. Yeah, in this it's a bit painful that it can only get kind of half the deck back into your hand, but it's fine. Tranquility just destroys all enchantments, so I don't think enchantments are... I don't think this would have had as much impact as it would have had, say, like in the Urza's block precons, where like enchantments were kind of all over the place. I don't think as many enchantments kicking around in Masques block, so I'm not sure how useful this would have been. But I suppose it can be discarded to Spell Shapers. And then the other row of the deck is Natural Affinity, 3 mana, all lands, so not just your opponents, not just your lands, but your opponent's lands as well. All become 2/2 creatures until end of turn. And there's an instant which is quite fun. So you can do it like middle of combat and suddenly just block with a bunch of lands, which is fun. I suppose that's the thing. It doesn't give haste. They don't get haste or anything, so you can't just suddenly swarm with a big army. But you could just create a bunch of blockers out of nowhere, I suppose. You know, if you had a way of sort of doing damage to a lot of creatures, this would be fine as well, because then you could like kill opponents' lands as when they're creatures. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, we do have some burn spells. We'll have a look at them in a minute. And then Tiger Claws, which is an aura, 2 colors and green. It's got flash. Enchanted creature has +1/+1 trample. Like for 3 mana, that's quite weak. Even being able to play, even with flash, that's not great. Definitely a far cry from things like Rancor in Urza's block. So Volcanic Wind, so this is, I guess, a card that has synergy with that Natural Affinity. So it's 4 mana, 2 red. Does X damage, divide as you choose amongst any number of target creatures, where X is the number of creatures in play. So that's quite fun. You know, you have, you know, say if there's 10 creatures out, like sweet, you can do 10 damage divided as you choose amongst those creatures. So that's kind of a thing that, you know, you've got 24 creatures in this deck, you're going to have a lot of creatures out. Yeah, so being able to kind of split that damage around, that's pretty good, I think, Volcanic Wind. Yeah. Obviously very expensive, but yeah, it has the potential to be very, very good and just kind of clear out a lot of creatures on your enemy side. Lunge, just 1 lunge, instant, 2 damage to target creature and 2 damage to target player. It's kind of like a grown-up shower of sparks. This is okay for some, like back in the day when this came out. I thought this card was like super good. It's just very average. It's okay. And then Thunderclap, 3 mana, instant, does 3 damage to target creature, and you can sacrifice a mountain instead of paying its cost. So Masques block also had this theme of like free spells, so which is fine, because like I think it does it in a better way than like the Urza's block way of doing free spells. Is when you just cast a spell, you get to untap all your land, which is obviously a bit broken. So these are more like pitch spells. Like if you really desperately need it, you could do it. And if you cast it for its value, then it's like a little expensive if you cast it. So it's kind of either way is not kind of ideal, but I guess having the flexibility makes it okay. And what was interesting as well, each color had its own sort of way of pitching. So red spells will usually sacrifice mountain. Green spells, I think, will give an opponent life. White spells are usually just like tap an untapped creature you control. Black spells were pay life, and I think blue spells were return stuff to your hand, or discard cards from your hand, or discard cards. So yeah, that's I will say that that's kind of interesting that each color had its own particular flavor in how it did these kind of free spells. So what could have been? So some cards that I think could have gone in the deck. So Invigorate is one of those pitch spells we just talked about. This gives +4/+4 for 3 mana. But if you have a forest, you can have an opponent gain life instead of you pay the cost, which is I think it's 3 life, which is fine because you're giving +4/+4, so you're still coming out ahead. And being able to do a pump spell for like free is really good. Messes up like combat. Furious Assault is whenever you play a creature, it does 1 damage to an opponent. You've got a lot of creatures, so it's pretty good. Snorting Gar is kind of like a grown-up Deepwood Wolverine. So it's 4 mana for a 3/3, and when it becomes blocked, it gets +2/+2 until end turn, which is, I mean, it's better than some of the green creatures in this deck. Definitely better than the Deepwood Tantive, because that thing is really not great. And then a couple of alternative rares. So Collective Unconscious lets you draw a card for every creature you control. I think this could have been better than the Natural Affinity, because I'm really not sure what kind of what Natural Affinity is doing in this deck, other than, I say, potentially powering up like that big volcanic wind. So I think Collective Unconscious would have been fine as a replacement. And Two-Headed Dragon, which is a big 4/4 fly with Menace. It's got fire breathing. This would have been a good rare to have as well. I think Battle Squadron is fine, but Two-Headed Dragon is, I mean, it's a Two-Headed Dragon. It's really cool, and it's like a big splashy red rare, and it's kind of dumb, and it wins games. So, and also really difficult to block because it has flying and it has menace. So yeah, really difficult to block. So in summary, this is fine. I think it's just a very sort of standard, boring red-green deck. Just play a load of creatures, swing them. It's not really. It's a bit boring. It's not doing anything too exciting, but it's not doing anything bad. Like it's kind of just like doing its job. It's pretty average, in my opinion. But what do you think? How do you think this deck looks on paper? Did you own this deck? Did you play with it? Did you make any changes to it? I'd really like to know. So put a comment below, and I'll be back next time to look at another Mercadian Masques pre-constructed deck. But until then, thank you for listening and watching. Have a great day.